So we've reached the end of the NHL teams for the 2025 NHL Draft Recap Series, and today what we're going to do is a little bit different. If you're unaware, I am a person who really likes to put my money where my mouth is, not literally, but figuratively speaking. Track players I would have picked at all of the Toronto Maple Leafs draft picks and just see how it goes. There is obviously a lot more to the picture than just drafting a player, letting them sit, and me not having any control over the process. There's a lot that could go right or wrong and affect things, but the point is to see the players that do work out and why, the players that don't work out and why, and refine things moving forward. The way you learn is by making mistakes, and by doing this yourself and putting your name beside guys that you really like and seeing how it goes, that is the best way to sort of cut through all of that, in my opinion, and really see it for yourself. Starting things off at 64, I went with a guy that I had in my top 15 in Michael Spurk. Fantastic hockey player, just an unbelievably energetic player. At the very least, I see a projectable third-line energy winger who may not be very big, but he's not small. This is the most SHL-ready prospect this season that is not an elite-level draft pick on people's boards. He just really seemed to come alive at that high pace of play. When there is a player that gets the privilege to go play against men and they don't look out of place at that level at 17 years old, that matters. He was one of the most undervalued players in this year's draft class. With a few more years of development, I would love to see him more agile. I would love to see him use some more skill at higher speeds, but most of all, I want to see him slow things down at times because he's just going all the time. Michael Spurk is the type of guy who will go in on a forecheck as an F1 and not strip a puck off a guy, rim around the boards, bring it to the blue line and look and overpossess the puck. He will get you behind the goal line and just give it a little tap out in front. If you go to the net with Michael Spurk on the ice, you might get rewarded. And that's what I love, because that's how a lot of times you catch goaltenders sleeping at the NHL level. You don't give them the time to set up. You don't give them the time to track what's going on. You just slip a pass out in front and you can do it. And in order to do that, you have to have pace, you have to have energy, you have to have speed, and you have to have the tenacity to do it. Then at 86th, I took Gustav Hilstrom, who, again, I love. Don't let anybody tell you I don't like big players. One of the smartest players in the draft, especially off the puck. His reads are excellent. His physical play is very good. I would love to see him be a bit of a better passer than he was, especially outside the offensive zone. Running play through him up the ice, I think, was a pretty big gap that limited some potential offensive headroom, but if he figures that out, there's a lot of developmental space for a guy like that at the higher levels of hockey. I do think he was okay at the SHL level, but they had put him on the wing there, and the physicality of that league just seemed to be a little bit too much. The pace of that game seemed to be a little bit too much, but at the end of the day, really good, energetic center with some good size and skill and pace and just an excellent mind for the game that I love. It's simple, but really, really effective hockey that I love to see. And there are guys drafted in the top 10, 15 picks that are ahead of where Hilstrom is, but I think in time you might see a guy like Hilstrom not be that much further down the depth chart than some of the other guys that were drafted way ahead of him in the draft. Then at 137th, I took Quinn Boschain, and I love this kid too. If you go and look at his game-by-game stats from the CHL and TDP challenge beyond that point, his point production as a share of his team's offense was right up there with some of the guys that went from the CHL in the first round playing defense not named Matthew Schaefer. He was one of the more productive players on one of the worst teams in the OHL this year, and I think there is just so much room to grow with a guy like Boschain. He's skilled, agile, a very smart gap-controlling defenseman, successful stick checks, finishing his checks. All these things defensively are definitely areas to improve. I would love to see him get stronger and definitely more explosive in his skating stride. He definitely covers ice laterally in open ice really well. He transports the puck really well, but adapting to quicker forwards along the boards and his board play overall just seemed really rocky to me. But still, in the middle of this year's draft class, I love the offensive tools that Boschain brings to the table, and I think that as Guelph improves, they've drafted a lot of really fun young players. That team might get to be a lot of fun really quickly, and I feel like Boschain is going to be a principal recipient of the gains there. Next up, we drafted Arvid Drot at 153rd. He's a player that I think brings a really well-rounded style of play, while also not being small. He scores a lot of goals, but it's not because he's just a better shooter and shoots from everywhere. He's a guy who goes to the net. He can shoot, yes, but he can also tip, attack the net, get behind the net, do wraparounds, rebounds. He scores goals in a variety of different ways and was a very, very productive player because of it. Now, I do think that the skating ability also goes well hand in hand with the style of play that he has. He's a pretty physical player as well, and I would love to see that explored more with him. Just a really efficient scoring winger that I really, really liked this year, that I think brings a lot of good things to the game, considering how young he is. I think that this is a guy that 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road could become a really, really intriguing player. At 185th, I took Daniil Skvortsov, who I am stunned didn't get drafted. He checks all of the boxes. Big, skates really well, scores a decent amount. I do think Skvortsov's defensive zone play was a little bit questionable when his footwork and ability to get around the ice kind of failed him a little bit. It was a step behind too often. He wasn't closing his checks, closing gaps along the boards well enough. But those are things I think you can learn, especially when you're a big, strong skater like a guy like Skvortsov. He had some excellent offensive zone moments from what I saw as well, and I just am stunned nobody took a chance on him in this year's draft class. When there was an even strength goals scored this year, he had points on 25% of them this season. That's better than a guy he played with a lot in Quinn Boschain, who I also really like as an offensive option. I'm happy to take a swing on a big, rangy Russian defenseman who gets around the ice really well and has some really good offensive tools in a guy like Skvortsov. At 217th, I didn't really care. The guy I picked, I think, is an extraordinarily long shot to make the NHL, but boy, do I love this guy, and I took Leo Sunquist. There were some other players in this range that I was looking at. I just went with the guy that brought me the most joy every time I watched him, and that was Leo Sunquist. Leo Sunquist is an extremely limited player, but what he does well, he does really, really well. This is a guy who is an excellent, excellent scorer. And at the SHL level, one of the fastest players I've tracked this year, blue line to blue line, absolutely ripping up and down the ice at this level. A really, really good generator of scoring chances too. His play with the puck needs a lot of work, slowing things down, making reads, keeping things simple, but the energy in his game is undeniable. I really think that one of the biggest keys to NHL success is just energy. Playing every shift like it's Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final as much as you physically possibly can. And I think a guy like Sunquist does do that. I will admit, this is a small winger, one of many that I've picked, and I think he's a long shot. But the ability to drive lanes off the puck, generate offense around the net in a pretty good way, this is just a guy who gets it in terms of being a complementary offensive piece on a line. So overall, I think I got a lot of things for me that complement what already is on the list really, really well. There's some good energy and a really solid floor with a guy like Spurk. I really like the solid two-way smarts of a guy like Hilstrom, and in the system for me right now, I don't really have that. Boschain, I think, is just a great pickup to have as just a good defenseman in the way that I like defensemen to play, especially with some good years of development. Arvid Drot is a really solid complementary scorer that I think has more in his tank and has the benefit of not being small and is very young. And Daniil Skvortsov, I just think could be a really good bet. And Sunquist at the end is just fun. I don't know if he's an NHL player. I can't say with certainty that he will be, but I hope so because he's a lot of fun to watch. Definitely is a complementary offensive piece. And I would definitely keep an eye on him this season regardless of where he's playing. So with that, we've reached the end of the 2025 Draft Recap Series. Thank you so much for watching, whether you watched one or all 33 of them. I'm really, really, really happy with how they went this season. And we're not done over at Scouching before the end of the offseason, as we are going to do a recap of prospect pipelines across the entire NHL landscape. We also have some other content ideas percolating that are a little bit different and something new, so stay tuned for that. Thank you very much for joining me. This series is always a joy to put together. You all seem to like it as well, and I'm really, really happy to provide it. So thank you very much, and we will see you in the Pipeline series.